Hello, everyone. I'm Paris Fox, and I'd like to welcome you to 12 O'Clock High, a podcast on business leadership with Tom Fox.
Hey, we take things in a little bit different direction by looking at the leadership lessons from the movie A Man for All Seasons, which tells the story of Sir Thomas More, a man of unwavering principles who stands up for his beliefs despite immense pressure from his king and the government. For compliance professionals, the leadership lessons around this film are profound as they emphasize the role of integrity, courage, and ethical commitments in the face of adversity. I know you'll enjoy this special edition of 12 O'Clock High, a podcast on business leadership. Before we get started, a word from our network sponsor, Ethico.
If you're a compliance officer, middle managers are crucial in getting your programs from you to your frontline employees. But how do we activate those managers and get them on our side? Ethico's new Middle Manager Toolkit equips you with the skills needed to empower your managers, to promote a culture where ethical behavior thrives and employees feel empowered to speak up. Learn how to turn frontline managers into ethical leaders with our new white paper, Empowering Middle Managers as Ethics Champions. And did I mention you can get the whole toolkit for free? Head to ethico.com to download the full toolkit today.
I'm going to take the synopsis of this story from the movie version that was the Oscar-winning movie version from 1966, produced and directed by Fred Zinnemann, adapted by Robert Bolt from his play of the same name. It depicts the final years of Sir Thomas More, the 16th century Lord Chancellor of England, who refused to sign a letter asking Pope Clement VII to annul Henry VIII's marriage to Catherine of Aragon and to take the oath of supremacy, declaring Henry supreme head of the church. The movie was a critical and box office success. It won the Academy Award for Best Picture. It won the award for Best Director and Best Actor for Paul Scofield. It was a hugely popular movie and I would say very influential going forward. This movie takes place between 1529 and 1535 during the reign of Henry VIII. During one late-night meeting, Cardinal Wolsey chastises More for being the only member of the Privy Council to oppose Wolsey's attempt to obtain from the Pope an annulment of Henry VIII's marriage to Catherine of Aragon, since it had not produced a male heir. With the annulment, Henry would be able to marry Anne Boleyn, whom he hopes to father a male heir. Returning to his home at Chelsea, at dawn, More finds his young acquaintance, Richard Rich, waiting for his return so he can lobby for a position at court. More on Rich later. At some point later, Wolsey dies in a rural monastery in disgrace after his banishment from court. The king makes an impromptu visit to the More estate and again requests more support for an annulment, but More remains unmoved as Henry alternates between threats, tantrums, and promises. The king leaves, and Cromwell promises Rich a position in court for providing damaging information about Sir Thomas More. More remains steadfast, however, in his refusal to take the oath and refuses to explain, knowing that he cannot be convicted if he is not explicitly denied the king's supremacy. A request for new books to read backfires, resulting in the confiscation of the books he has, and More is placed in a cell based upon the testimony of Richard Rich, or at least the word of Richard Rich. More is brought to trial with Cromwell appearing as counsel for the prosecution. More refuses to express an opinion about the king's second marriage or why he will not take an oath. As a lawyer and judge, he cites his silence as part of his defense, based on the legal principle that silence is to be interpreted as consent. Richard Rich, however, testifies that when he went to confiscate Thomas More's books, More told him that Parliament has the power to dethrone a king and that More will not take the oath. Under a direct order from Cromwell, the jury convicts More without leaving the courtroom to deliberate. As the judges begin to pronounce the death penalty, More interrupts and reminds him that prisoners are to be asked before sentencing if they have anything to say, which More says he does. And More cites Parliament's act of supremacy, repugnant to every legal precedent and institution of history in Christendom, and he is remitted to the Tower to await execution by beheading, which, of course, is what happens to Sir Thomas More and later St. Thomas More. So what are the leadership lessons to be learned for the corporate executive and the corporate compliance officer from A Man for All Seasons? It obviously is a classic story, which tells the powerful story of Sir Thomas More, whose integrity, resilience, and moral courage set him apart in a time of political and ethical turmoil. For corporate executives, the movie provides an enduring set of lessons on leadership, accountability, and ethical conviction, even in the face of immense pressure. So what are some of the key takeaways for today's compliance leaders? Number one, the value of integrity. Sir Thomas More's integrity is in the centerpiece of the film as he refuses to compromise his beliefs even under the threat of execution. In the corporate world, integrity forms the backbone of strong leadership. Leaders who prioritize ethical standards foster trust not only within their organizations, but with stakeholders, clients, and the broader public. The lesson is integrity is not negotiable. For corporate leaders, it means sticking to core values, even when facing pressure to take shortcuts or bend the rules for financial gain. Boy, does Jeff Bezos need to understand and learn that lesson. 2, courage in decision-making. Sir Thomas More's courage is evident as he stands up to King Henry VIII, who demands his approval for a decision More believes to be wrong. The courage is vital for corporate executives who are often faced with challenging decisions that define the trajectory of their business and even their own careers. The lesson is that leading courageously means making tough calls and standing by them. Leaders should be willing to confront difficult truths and take a stand, especially when the ethical path is the harder path. Number 3, understanding the importance of accountability. In the movie, Sir Thomas More stands alone in his convictions, with no one overseeing or holding him accountable for his decisions. The autonomy contrasts with a corporate environment where boards and stakeholders expect accountability. More's actions remind leaders that accountability is a commitment to those affected by their decisions. The lesson is that you should create corporate or policies, procedures, internal controls, and systems that build accountability, such as regular transparency with the board, open dialogue with employees, and checks and balances in decision-making. Accountability solidifies trust and integrity across your organization. Number 4, balancing legal and moral responsibility. More's ethical stance goes beyond the legal obligation of his time, as he adheres to a higher moral standard than even he could not escape punishment by conforming to the law. Corporate leaders today face a similar challenge, balancing compliance with what's right in a broader sense. The lesson is that compliance leaders and business leaders should see compliance as a minimum, not the ceiling. Ethical responsibility often goes beyond legal requirements to build a reputation that reflects the values of your organization. Number 5, commitment to a higher purpose. More's actions are driven by a higher purpose, reflecting in his belief in moral values that surpass changing whims of political power. For corporate leaders, finding greater purpose beyond profits can create a greater and more lasting impact on a variety of stakeholders, employees, customers, communities, yes, and even shareholders. The lesson is by embracing a purpose-driven leadership model that aligns with business goals with positive societal contributions. This can give you a clear sense of purpose, which can inspire employees, foster loyalty, and drive long-term business success. 6, leading with humility. Sir Thomas More's humility and lack of ego allow him to stand firm in his conviction without needing recognition or approval. For today's business executives, humility is an essential trait that builds trust and rapport among employees and clients alike. As a lesson, you should practice humility by being open to feedback, acknowledging mistakes, and valuing the contribution of others. Humility in leadership allows others to feel valued, paving the way for a collaboration and inclusive corporate culture. 7, building resilience amidst adversity. Throughout the movie, More faces unrelenting pressure, yet he never wavers in his conviction. In the corporate arena, resilience is the ability to remain steadfast despite obstacles, setbacks, or failures. The lesson is that by developing resilience, you stay grounded in your values and focus on long-term goals. In challenging times such as the mid-2020s, resilience helps maintain stability and reinforces confidence among your team. Number 8, setting a standard for ethical leadership. I can't think of a better standard of ethical leadership that Thomas More set for those around him, becoming a benchmark of what it means to lead with integrity. Corporate executives have the same opportunity to model ethical behavior that others in an organization can follow. The lesson is that as a leader, you demonstrate the standards you expect of others. Act as a role model in both words and actions, fostering an environment where ethical conduct is the norm, not the exception. A Man for All Seasons demonstrates that true leadership is defined by integrity, humility, and courage in the face of ethical challenges. For today's corporate executives, these values are not just ideals, but essential elements of strong, effective, and respected leadership. Embracing these principles can inspire loyalty, create a positive corporate culture, and ultimately drive a legacy that extends far beyond mere business success. Compliance Podcast Network is sponsored this month by Ethico. Ethico is a leader for compliance champions like yourself with its ethics and compliance optimization system built to turn goals and guidelines into real ROI for your program. For more information and a special white paper, go to ethico.com/CPN. Compliance Podcast Network is sponsored this month by Ethico. Ethico is a leader for compliance champions like yourself with its ethics and compliance optimization system built to turn goals and guidelines into real ROI for your program. For more information and a special white paper, go to ethico.com/CPN. 12 O'Clock High, a podcast on business leadership, is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network. If you'd like to come on the podcast to talk about your leadership skills, please give me a shout. tfox@tfoxlaw.com.